In the 12th century, when the world was still half dream and half faith, when men drew dragons on the edges of their maps and called it the unknown, there was born a name, a whisper that passed from cloister to cathedral, from monk to monarch. A name that glowed like a promise in the minds of men who had never seen the East, but believed in the miracles it held. They called him Prester John. In that age, faith was not only a creed, it was a compass. It pointed beyond deserts, over seas, through the shimmer of mirage and myth. And somewhere out there, beyond the boundaries of Christendom, they believed there was a kingdom, radiant, eternal, untouched by sin or time, ruled by a Christian king whose heart burned with holy fire. His land, they said, overflowed with milk and honey. Its rivers ran with pearls and crystal. Its walls were built not by hands, but by angels. The story began, as legends often do, with a letter. A letter that arrived from nowhere, sealed in crimson wax, written in gold upon parchment finer than silk. It bore the sign of the cross and the words of a man who claimed to rule a land of light. A priest, a king, a shepherd of souls who called himself Presbyter Johannes, Prester John. He wrote of his kingdom beyond Persia, where no serpent dwells, where lions lie beside lambs, and the air itself hums with prayer. He wrote of rivers that heal, mountains that shine, and cities that glow like stars at dusk. He wrote that his people were faithful, his armies righteous, and his throne blessed by God himself. And at the end of his message came a promise that echoed through every chapel and court. I shall come to your aid, O brothers in Christ. From the east I shall rise when the world is most in peril. The monks who read it trembled. The bishops copied it by candlelight. And soon the letter of Prester John spread across all of Europe, carried by riders, merchants, and rumor itself. Every copy glowed brighter with retelling. Every heart that heard it believed it must be true. For how could such beauty be born from lies? How could such a kingdom not exist, when the world itself still seemed half-formed, its mysteries endless, its horizon open like scripture waiting to be read? From Rome to Paris, from Lisbon to Constantinople, men spoke of him as if he were already among them, the guardian of a hidden Christendom, the king who had built his paradise where east meets dawn. In monasteries they prayed to join him. In royal courts they dreamed to find him, but no one had ever seen his face. No caravan had reached his gate. No ship had found the shores of his shining land. And yet, the legend grew. For legends do not need truth to live. They need only belief. And belief in that age was the mightiest force of all. Picture now a hall of stone and silence. A bishop lifting the letter high before a crowd of weary pilgrims. His voice trembles as the candles flicker around him, throwing shadows that dance upon the ancient walls. He has written to us, the bishop whispers, from beyond the deserts of Persia. A kingdom of the faithful awaits. And as his words echo, hope stirs like a flame. Men who have never seen the sea begin to dream of voyages. Knights who have never left their homeland vowed across the world. Map makers trace new continents where none exist. For in the name of Prester John, the world's edges began to move. The idea of him became a doorway, and through that doorway, the age of exploration would one day walk. But in this moment, in this age of quills and ink, of gold and silence, the legend is still young. It is fragile and yet unstoppable. It spreads like fire through parchment and prayer, burning its way into the heart of every man who dares to believe that somewhere, far beyond the sands and storms, there lies a kingdom untouched by time, waiting to be found. And so begins the quest, not for gold nor for glory, but for the impossible. Because sometimes it is the dream we chase that changes the world, even if the dream was never real. The letter traveled faster than any army, swifter than any wind. From the cloisters of Rome to the high towers of Paris, from the frozen halls of the north to the golden courts of Iberia, it spread like wildfire across the continent. In every kingdom it touched, it left behind the same quiet wonder and the same dangerous hope. It was called the Letter of Prester John. No one knew where it came from, nor who had first carried it. Some said it fell from the heavens, sealed in blood-red wax and marked with the sign of the cross. Others swore it was delivered by a wandering priest who vanished the moment it was read. But none doubted the hand that had written it. For in its words there was majesty. In its promises there was the power to shake empires. I, Prester John, servant of God and Lord of the faithful, rule over 72 kingdoms beyond Persia and India. In my land flow rivers of milk and honey. My people know no hunger, no war, no shadow of the devil. And when the end of days draws near, I shall come to aid my brothers in the West, to unite all Christendom under the light of heaven. Those words became scripture to a people desperate for meaning. Europe, weary of crusades and divided by kings, found in this letter a revelation, a promise that salvation did not end at the edge of the known world. And so, the letter was copied, translated, adorned with gold. Each monastery kept its own version. Each scribe added his own touch, a brighter sun, a purer kingdom, a holier king. What began as a single spark became a constellation of belief, glowing on the pages of illuminated manuscripts. In candlelit rooms, monks whispered of the mighty ruler in the East, who had never been seen, yet whose power was felt in every prayer. They painted his lands upon maps that glowed in red and gold, charting kingdoms no man had ever crossed. And in the courts of power, that whisper turned to command. For kings began to dream, dreams of alliance, of conquest, of divine unity. If Prester John could be found, if his armies could march beside theirs, Christendom might yet encircle the world. In the marble halls of the Vatican, the letter was read aloud before the Pope himself. Candles flickered upon the faces of cardinals as silence fell heavy as stone. A single voice broke it. If this king be true, the Pope declared, then the hand of God has written to us. We must find him. We must reach his realm. The fate of the faith may rest upon his crown. From that moment, the world began to move. Messengers rode through storm and snow, carrying copies of the sacred text. Envoys were sent eastward, toward the lands of India, of Cathay, of the mysterious Mongol hordes. Sailors traced new routes upon the parchment, red ink bleeding across seas no one had yet crossed. Each mark, each line, was a prayer in motion. Maps were no longer instruments of geography. They were dreams. Dreams drawn in ink and hope, where every mountain hid a miracle and every horizon whispered, "There lies the kingdom of Prester John." The letter had become more than a message. It was a vision, and visions once born are not easily silenced. It gave the weary a reason to believe, and the powerful a reason to act. It turned faith into ambition, and ambition into movement. In the stillness of Europe's cathedrals, beneath frescoes of angels and saints, something ancient stirred, a hunger, not for gold nor glory, but for meaning, and it would drive men to the ends of the earth. For the world had received a letter from God's own messenger, and no one could resist the call to answer it. The year was the 13th century, an age when the world itself seemed to unfold like a map newly drawn. In the courts of Europe, the name Prester John still burned like a distant star, and now men would ride toward that light. They came from kingdoms divided by faith and ambition, but united by one dream, to find the hidden Christian emperor beyond the East. From the monasteries of Italy, from the ports of Venice, from the halls of kings, riders set forth into the unknown. Among them was a priest named Giovanni da Pian del Carpini, sent by the Pope himself, and another, a young Venetian merchant, Marco Polo, whose footsteps would echo through centuries. They crossed lands no map dared name, deserts that swallowed men whole, mountains crowned with ice, oceans of grass where the horizon itself seemed to flee. They carried crosses and scrolls, faith and fear in equal measure, and with every mile eastward, the familiar world behind them grew smaller, fainter, until only the wind remained. But what they found in the east was not the kingdom of Prester John. It was something far greater and far more terrible. For rising out of the mist and dust came the banners of the Mongol Empire, vast, unbroken, and unstoppable. An ocean of riders, black silhouettes against the burning sky. Their horses thundered like drums of war. Their arrows fell like rain. Where they passed, kingdoms vanished. Cities burned to ash. Empires that had stood for centuries were erased in a single season. Europe had imagined a land of saints and miracles. Instead, it had found a storm. And yet, there was something divine about that storm. For the Mongols moved not with chaos, but with perfect order, a discipline that seemed carved by the hand of destiny itself. Their great leader, Genghis Khan, called himself the Scourge of God, and many among the travelers whispered, "Could this be him, the King of the East, the one foretold by the letter? Could Prester John have been the Khan all along?" The line between prophecy and reality began to blur. Some believed the Mongols were the army of Prester John, a people chosen by heaven to purify the world through conquest. Others believed they were his destroyers, the dark mirror of the legend, come to shatter it forever. But in truth, the myth was beginning to change, as all myths must when they meet the touch of the real world. For the East that Europe found was not one of miracles, but of power, not of angels, but of men. And yet that truth was no less wondrous, because within that revelation, a new kind of vision was born, not of a perfect kingdom, but of a vast, untamed world waiting to be known. Marco Polo would later write of lands where the sun bled red over fields of silver grass, of kings who ruled without fear, and of roads that stretched farther than the mind could follow. He did not find Prester John, but in seeking him, he discovered something far more enduring, the immensity of the world itself. And still, the West could not let the dream die, because even as the truth grew clearer, the legend remained too beautiful to abandon. So Prester John lived on, no longer as a man of flesh and crown, but as an idea carried by every explorer who set his eyes upon the horizon. The myth had changed shape, but it was alive, alive in the wind that howled across the steppe, in the fire of belief that no empire could extinguish. And as the Mongol drums thundered and the chants of throat singers rose beneath the endless sky, one truth echoed across the centuries. The East was never what we imagined, and yet it was everything we hoped it would be. When the East yielded no miracles, the gaze of Europe began to drift south, toward the edge of the known world, where the sea itself seemed to fall into eternity. There, beyond the deserts of Arabia and the walls of Islam, rumors spoke of another realm, a Christian kingdom hidden amidst the mountains of Africa. Its name was Ethiopia, and to those who still believed, it could be nothing less than the long-lost empire of Prester John. For centuries, his kingdom had danced just beyond reach, shifting like a mirage from Asia to India, from the Silk Road to the Mongol plains. But now the myth found new winds to carry it, and those winds smelled of salt and gold. Upon the cliffs of Sagres, under skies washed in crimson and silver, Prince Henry the Navigator stood watching the horizon. Below him, the ocean murmured with promises. Ships waited in the harbor, their sails marked with the red cross of Christ, their hulls trembling with the hunger of discovery. Henry's eyes followed the fading line of the sun. He did not look eastward toward Jerusalem, as generations before him had done. He looked west and south, to the unknown. He whispered to his captains, "If we find him, if Prester John truly reigns in Africa, then the East and West shall be one." Those words became more than hope. They became a mission, holy, political, and deeply human. For Europe no longer sought merely a king. It sought its reflection, a brother in faith, a divine ally hidden among the black mountains and burning sands. And so the ships sailed, the caravels of Portugal, small and fragile against the vastness of the sea, yet filled with a courage larger than empire itself. They cut through the dark blue waters, guided by stars that no chart had yet named. Each wave that broke against their hull was a heartbeat of destiny. They followed the African coast, stopping at lands where the air was heavy with spice and song, where kings wore gold like sunlight, and the rivers bled red with earth. Envoys carried crosses into palaces of stone and sand, presenting gifts to rulers whose faces gleamed in torchlight. The language of diplomacy was halting, but the dream behind it was clear: to find the mythical Christian sovereign of the South. And in every meeting, every exchange of gesture and gaze, the legend grew stronger. The Portuguese believed they were not simply exploring, they were fulfilling prophecy. They were searching for the ally promised by God, the hidden guardian who would unite the faith and strike at the heart of the infidel world. The voyage was perilous. Many ships never returned. Storms swallowed fleets. Fever took men before they reached the tropics. But still, they sailed. Because faith is not a flame easily drowned. It burns even in the heart of the tempest. And through that faith, through the myth of Prester John, a new age began to dawn. An age when oceans became highways and maps were rewritten in blood and wonder. An age of discovery. For it was hope, not gold, that guided them. Hope that the divine could be found not only in heaven, but upon the earth, in the faces of unknown kings, in lands untouched by Europe's gaze. And from that hope came the greatest journeys ever undertaken. One of them, led by a man named Vasco da Gama, would sail farther than any before him. In 1498, his ship broke into the Indian Ocean, carrying not only trade and ambition, but the last breath of an ancient dream. Prester John had not been found, but in seeking him, mankind had discovered the world. Prester John was never found. His kingdom, the shining realm of crystal towers and rivers of milk, existed not in any corner of the earth, but in the imagination of a world that longed for unity. For centuries, men searched deserts and oceans for his crown, his banner, his promise. They found kingdoms, yes, and kings and empires and wonders beyond their reckoning. But none bore his name, none carried his letter, and so the world began to understand. The kingdom they sought had never been of stone or soil. It was made of hope. In quiet monasteries and candlelit studies, scholars began to gather the fragments, torn letters, weathered maps, fading stories once told in awe. The ink had dried, the parchment cracked with age. The once glowing promise of Prester John had become a relic, a myth dissected by reason. Yet even as the myth faded, its shadow remained, for it had connected faith with exploration and faith with power. It had turned prayer into motion and imagination into empire. And though no one had found the priest king, countless men had followed his ghost across the world. And in that pursuit, the world itself had changed. Those who sought him in the east discovered the vastness of Asia. Those who followed his light southward found new continents, new faiths, new roads that would bind humanity together, and divide it too. Every voyage that began in his name ended in discovery, though not the one they expected. Cut to the faint glow of a candle trembling beside a spinning globe. The world turned slowly like an old memory. Europe at its crown, Africa below, Asia stretching into mist. The globe creaks as if remembering the weight of all those dreams that once circled its surface. In seeking Prester John, men learned to measure the oceans, to map the stars, to face the terror of the unknown. They left the safety of faith to find the truth of the earth. And though the truth was colder, harder, more real, it was theirs. The letter that once promised salvation had instead given birth to discovery. The myth that once bound the soul had freed the mind, and in that strange alchemy of belief and disillusionment, humanity took its first step toward the modern age. Soft sound of parchment tearing. A scroll disintegrates between a scholar's fingers. The dust floats upward, catching candlelight like gold. The name of Prester John slowly turned to dust, but his spirit remained, not as a man, nor as a monarch, but as an idea that across every border, across every language and creed, there might exist something greater than ourselves, a light waiting just beyond the horizon. And perhaps that was the truth all along, that the kingdom of Prester John was never meant to be found, it was meant to be followed. Because in the act of seeking what is not real, we sometimes find what is. We find courage, we find wonder, we find the vastness of the world and the smallness of our place within it. And so the myth did not die, it evolved. It lived on in the hearts of explorers, in the prayers of sailors staring at foreign stars, in the pages of dreamers who refused to believe that the world had an end. Cut to a ship drifting into mist, its white sails glowing in the light of dawn. The sea is calm now, the wind soft. The vessel disappears slowly, swallowed by the horizon, not in defeat, but in peace. Prester John's kingdom was never found because it was never lost. It lives wherever faith and curiosity meet, in every question that dares to reach beyond what is known. For in the end, the true kingdom of man was not built upon miracles, but upon the courage to keep searching, even when the stars go dark. The kingdom of Prester John was never of earth or stone. It was not carved into mountains, nor built by the hands of men. It lived and still lives in the hidden chambers of the human heart. In that quiet place where faith becomes wonder, and wonder becomes the light that guides us forward. When the last explorers returned home, their sails torn, their maps worn thin, the world seemed smaller, but the dream had grown infinitely vast. For though no man ever found the gates of Prester John's realm, the search for it had revealed another kingdom, the boundless kingdom of imagination. Look now, the night fades into dawn. The stars, once seen as angels or omens, dissolve into the first pale light of day. The old maps crumble to dust, their dragons and miracles fading, yet their outlines still whisper of what once was believed. The parchment becomes sky, the ink becomes constellation. The legend, unbound from the earth, ascends to the heavens. For every age has its own Prester John. Every generation builds its shining city somewhere beyond the horizon, a place untouched by pain, unbroken by doubt, where the world is whole again. And though we may name it differently, paradise, utopia, heaven, the new world, the longing behind each name is the same. It is the desire to see the divine reflected within ourselves. He was never a king of marble halls or jeweled crowns. He ruled no armies, wrote no laws, held no lands. Yet his dominion endures, invisible yet eternal. A realm that exists in every soul that dares to dream of something greater than what is. Ancient maps turn slowly into fields of stars. Cathedrals shimmer on the surface of still water, their spires reflected like memories. Shadows of explorers merge with the horizon, dissolving into the light. In every age we dream of hidden realms, of perfect kings, of truths just beyond sight. And though Prester John never ruled a single nation, his legend still rules the heart of the dreamer. It rules the poet who writes of worlds unseen, the scientist who looks through glass and sees infinity, the traveler who steps beyond the known and whispers, "There must be more." It rules the child who looks at the stars and feels, for the first time, the gravity of wonder. For this is the kingdom eternal, not of land, but of longing, not of power, but of purpose. A kingdom that cannot be charted, conquered, or destroyed, because it exists wherever belief endures, and belief is indestructible. The name Prester John may now belong to legend, but legends are not lies. They are truths told sideways, the language of the soul reaching for what the world cannot hold. They remind us that even in our age of steel and satellites, we are still explorers, still searching for the divine spark that hides between the stars, beneath the skin of the ordinary, within the silence between heartbeats. And so the quest continues, not across continents, but within. The map lies not upon parchment, but in the mind. And the kingdom, ever elusive, waits at the edge of our understanding. Perhaps that was the meaning all along, that Prester John was never meant to be found, because he was never lost. He was a reflection of our yearning, our courage, our endless hunger for the unknown. The world no longer searches for his golden gates, but his kingdom remains, shining unseen, within every soul that dares to wonder. And so, as the first light breaks upon the sea, the story ends where it began, not in certainty, but in awe. For the kingdom of Prester John was never in the east nor in the south. It was always here, in the dream that refuses to die.